the AMD Ryzen doesn't always get the attention it deserves, especially when compared to some of the bigger names in the desktop processor market. That's exactly why I'm covering it today, to give it a fair and thorough look, so you can decide for yourself whether it's worth considering. I want to be upfront with you. This review is based on my research, and the link to the product will be in the description below, which is an affiliate link. This means I'll earn a commission if you decide to buy it, but don't worry, it won't cost you anything extra. So, what is the AMD Ryzen? It's a desktop processor designed for heavy users who need a reliable and fast execution of tasks. It's typically around the higher mid-range to high-end price tier, which puts it in competition with some of the more established brands. If you're someone who's looking for a processor that can handle multitasking, content creation, and maybe some gaming on the side, the AMD Ryzen might be worth considering. It's got 8 cores and 16 threads, which is plenty for most users, and it's built on a 5nm process technology, which is usually a good indicator of reliable performance. In terms of build and box contents, the AMD Ryzen is a standard-sized processor, so it should fit in most desktop cases without any issues. The packaging is usually pretty straightforward, with the processor itself, a cooler, and some instructions. The build quality is typically good, with a solid metal finish that should withstand normal use. However, I've heard some reports of the cooler being a bit flimsy, so you might want to consider upgrading to a better one if you're planning on overclocking. The weight is usually around average for a processor of this size, and the form factor is standard, so you shouldn't have any issues with compatibility. Now, let's talk about real-world use. I've researched how the AMD Ryzen performs in different scenarios, and I've got to say, it's a bit of a mixed bag. If you're a heavy user who needs to multitask a lot, the AMD Ryzen is a great choice. It can handle multiple tasks at once without breaking a sweat, and the 8 cores and 16 threads really come into play here. For example, if you're a video editor who needs to render 4K footage, the AMD Ryzen can handle it with ease. It's also great for streaming, as it can handle the processing demands of streaming software without any issues. However, if you're a hardcore gamer, the AMD Ryzen might not be the best choice. It's not that it can't handle games, but it's not as strong as some of the other processors on the market. For example, if you're playing a game that's heavily reliant on single-thread performance, the AMD Ryzen might struggle a bit. On the other hand, if you're playing a game that's more multi-threaded, like a strategy game or an MMO, the AMD Ryzen is a great choice. Another scenario where the AMD Ryzen excels is in content creation. If you're a photographer or a graphic designer, the AMD Ryzen can handle tasks like photo editing and rendering with ease. It's also great for 3D modeling and animation, as it can handle the complex calculations required for these tasks. However, if you're working with very large files or complex projects, you might need to consider a more powerful processor. In terms of weaknesses, the AMD Ryzen has a few. One of the main weaknesses is its single-thread performance, which can be a bit of a bottleneck in certain applications. This is because the AMD Ryzen is designed more for multi-threaded workloads, so it's not as strong in single-threaded tasks. Another weakness is its power consumption, which can be a bit high compared to some of the other processors on the market. This can increase your electricity bill over time, so it's something to consider if you're planning on running your computer 24/7. Finally, the value proposition of the AMD Ryzen is a bit questionable, especially when compared to some of the other processors in the same price range. It's not that it's not a good processor, but you might be able to find a better deal elsewhere. That being said, the AMD Ryzen is still a solid choice for the right buyer. If you're someone who needs a reliable and fast processor for multitasking and content creation, the AMD Ryzen is a great choice. It's also a good choice for streamers and video editors, as it can handle the processing demands of these tasks with ease. On the other hand, if you're a hardcore gamer or someone who needs a processor with strong single-thread performance, you might want to look elsewhere. In conclusion, the AMD Ryzen is a solid processor that's worth considering, especially if you're in the market for a reliable and fast desktop processor. It's not perfect, but it's a great choice for the right buyer. If you're someone who's looking for a processor that can handle multiple